Jane Hikel is a Central alumna and taught English and women's studies there. Monkey Boulevard chronicles her family's survival during World War II and her experience as an immigrant child growing up.
Wow. Thank you so much. Hi, Linda. Just noticed. And Lynn. By the way, I just have to say that this book came together because of Lynn Patarini sitting in the back there. Yeah. If she hadn't encouraged me and actually did some of the organizing of this, then it wouldn't have happened, I don't think. Yeah, thank you, Lynn. Okay, so I want to thank you all for coming. I mean, I feel like I've got a fan club or something, which is nice. Thank Gil for inviting me to come and talk about Monkey Boulevard. So I'll talk a little bit what inspired me to write this. And first it was my parents, Marianne and Bronisława, to whom this book is dedicated because they were my first storytellers. And they were good at it. And so the stories were really interesting, but albeit, they were sometimes tragic. So my parents were from Poland, and in 1943, they and their families were taken from their homes by the Nazis and sent as slave laborers to Austria. And in 1945, the British liberated them and told them, pointing east, you can go that way and meet the Russians, because they were both from Poland, or you can, going back to Poland, or you can come with us. We're going south, and we're going to liberate Italy from the fascists. So they made the right choice to go south. And the rest, of course, is a history of my parents' journey. And so I was born in Trani, Italy, in 1946. Now you know my age. And Gil is a paisan, okay, because his mother, right, is Barriese from Puglia. So, same area, right? It was kind of shocking when we first learned that. It's like, he's like, no, you're not. Like, yes, I was born in Trani. So at 1 month old, my parents immigrated to a Polish dependence camp in Hampshire, England. That was because of my father's service in the Polish army under the British. And we lived there for 5 years, and I never learned to speak English because it was a Polish camp. I mean, just wasn't available. There were 2 more migrations before I ended up in the U.S., married to him, that guy there, Jerry. Yeah. You're part of this story. And in 1999, I took a memoir writing class with Professor Jill Weinberger, where I wrote some pieces that are the beginning of this story. And it took 23 years and many starts and stops, but finally last summer came together because of Lynn. And yeah, thank you. And also Rebel Dog, right? Where we met to discuss this, because she's allergic to cats, and I've got a cat, so that was good. Rebel Dog was good. So I do wish that my best friend Dolly, could be here. She's a vital part of my childhood. We were best friends since I was 7 and she was 6. She made my childhood fun and interesting as we roamed the streets of Villemard and Monkey Boulevard together. We were truly free-range kids, and I don't think that exists anymore. So anyway, it was great. So I've been thinking what I should read today, and I decided to go with Linda Rutledge, whose book I recently read. She's the author of Westwood Giraffes, which is a really good book. And she said when she was asked about her writing process, she says, I don't get up at 4 a.m. every morning or write a certain number of pages every day. She says when she is writing, she thinks if I am entertained, then my readers will be too. And so that's me. I can read any part of my book and I'm entertained still. So even though it's my story. So to give you a sense of the immigrant neighborhood that I grew up in, I'll read an excerpt from Chapter 6, which is The House on Monkey Boulevard. And I have to tell you, while I was putting the book together and writing pieces, I was thinking of Sandra Cisneros' The House on Mango Street, and the pieces that she wrote, which is kind of a hybrid, sort of a memoir, I guess. It's fiction. So I was inspired by her. So I'll start with that, and I'll just read some excerpts, I guess. The house on Monkey Boulevard. The tenement in Villemard, where my family lived from 1952 to 1959, was in a residential and industrial area between two waterways, the undisturbed aqueduct that flowed serenely past its western boundary, and the tanker-packed Lachine Canal that connected the interior of the island to the St. Lawrence River. The area was populated by European immigrants, mostly Southern Italian, nestled in among the majority French Canadians and Irish, the latter of both the Catholic and Protestant varieties. The first group of 20th century immigrants came over in the 1930s and were known in Polish as Pierwsza Imigracja, or First Immigration. The post-World War II immigrants, the second immigration, or Druga Imigracja, were mostly displaced Eastern Europeans, like my family, and Southern Italians. The Italians outnumbered all the other immigrant groups and had a longer history of settling in Villemard. In fact, before the Second World War broke out, there was a fascist club in what Italians pronounced as Villamorco. The majority of residents in Villemard were the French, who had their own churches and schools, and essentially maintained the two solitudes separation that Hugh MacLennan wrote about in his eponymous novel. The European immigrants followed the first immigration's example of sending their children to English Catholic schools because it was a commonly held belief that English was the language of business. For my parents, living among Italians and other immigrant groups was not new, as they had spent time in southern Italy. Hearing gregarious southern Italian voices that often broke into song was what they were used to. The soundscape of Villamorco was Quebecois French, exuberant Italian, and quiet English with a smattering of even quieter Slavic tongues. It was a true ethnic mosaic, but a vertical one, as new immigrants attempted to fit themselves in a hierarchical class system that followed a stratified social code as varied as its residents. The Italians also had their own name for Monk Boulevard, the busy commercial thoroughfare of Villemard. They called it Monte Boulevardo, which the Poles adapted to Monkey Boulevard. It was a joke in our home that we lived on Monkey Boulevard. Life on the boulevard was quite exciting. We lived in a third-story, walk-up shotgun tenement, and next door with a laneway, which is what Canadians call an alley. In between was a tavern. On Friday nights, the tavern would fill with men. Only men were permitted, drinking away their weekly pay. Soon there would be a line of women with children in tow trying to draw the family provider out of the tavern. A boy would be sent inside to retrieve Papa, telling him that ma mère is waiting outside. My siblings and I had a perfect view of the Friday night drama from our third-floor perch. From the bedroom window, we could see down into the transom windows of the tavern. The boy would weave through the crowd of work-garbed men, and eventually out would stumble Papa to greet his angry wife and hand over the rest of his pay. You have to understand, we didn't have a TV yet, so this was definitely entertainment. The best times for viewing tavern activity were the stag parties. Catholic weddings were scheduled for early Saturday morning with a high mass, so when the weather warmed up, the revelry began, and Friday night became even more exciting. After dinner, we would sit on the front balcony that provided a perfect sight line up and down the boulevard. We would watch as a flatbed truck came down the street with a blindfolded groom trussed up on a post, sometimes stripped to his underwear, and tarred and feathered or dressed in a black and white striped prison uniform with a ball and chain secured to his leg. We would then run to the bedroom window that afforded us a view of the tavern interior. The victim would be taken into the tavern and made to drink copious tankards of Molson and then back on the truck to the next tavern. The most shocking thing I ever saw was a blindfolded groom thrown into a delivery van stacked full of bananas. The truck was parked at the back of the tavern, so we ran to the back porch for a good view of the future groom passed out on top of stocks of bananas. Soon the driver came out of the tavern and drove off. Whatever happened to that poor guy? Thinking about it today, it was probably a setup, and maybe the victim was eventually released and found his way to the church in time for his wedding. So that was kind of, gives you a little flavor of, what it was like to live there. And then when I started first grade, which was the first time I experienced the English language, it was kind of difficult because we had just arrived from England, and I think it was February and August, the end of August, school started. And so it was not knowing the language, which a lot of the kids didn't, I suppose, was a challenge. So it was the first day of first grade at Holy Cross School in Villemard section of Montreal. We sat at our little wooden desks, 30 or so 6-year-old girls in navy blue tunics and white blouses with hands clasped on our desktops. Miss Hayes, a lady with tightly curled gray hair and glasses, was going down the list of students in the book on her desk. Looking up, she said, "Anne-Marie Baldwin," back to the paper. Moving her head up and down from book to the room, she went on calling out, "Sandra Corcoran, Linda Dufresne, Gail Flaherty, Margaret Murphy, Carmela Natali, Claire O'Neill," and so on. I did not speak or understand a word of English, but I caught on when a girl would raise her hand and Miss Hayes would make a check in her book with her pen. My turn would come, and I waited for it, determined not to respond. I don't know what made me decide not to raise my hand. Perhaps it was my obstinate shyness, although that usually got me in more trouble than I expected. Maybe I wanted the attention because that would make me distinct from the rest of the navy blue uniformed girls. When Miss Hayes said something strange sounding and no one raised her hand, I knew that she was calling on me. She repeated the sounds several times, but my arm remained stuck to the desk. Finally, probably by process of elimination, she figured out I was the one. I never did raise my hand, but stared back at her when she pointed to me and repeated the strange-sounding syllables. So some of you might be aware that Jane is not my real name, my legal name. My legal name is Jadwiga, which is a Polish name that my father actually decided on. So that's how I ended up becoming Jane, because people couldn't pronounce Jadwiga, but that's another story. Anyway, having a weird-sounding name is not the worst thing that can happen to a 6-year-old unless it is your first day in first grade and you don't speak the language. My Polish parents could not have anticipated this problem when they bestowed on me the name Jadwiga when I was born in a refugee camp in southern Italy. My father told me that I was named for a Polish queen who was also a Catholic saint, Królowa Święta Jadwiga, Queen Saint Jadwiga, who, by the way, was married to Jagiello, that the Jagiellonian University is named for in Krakow. She died young, and she gave birth to a child. They both died, but he had made a promise. Her consort, who was Lithuanian, had made a promise that he would build a university, in her honor. But he named it after himself, so I don't get that. Figures, right? Okay. As much as I like that royal provenance, my parents' choice did not bode well for an immigrant child in an English-speaking country. So, different way. People have pronounced the name different ways, but usually as a Jad, Viga, or Wiga. And that's kind of, it sounds horrible in Polish because Jad J-A-D, which is pronounced Jad. It's actually D-Z-I-A-D pronunciation, right, Eva? Do I have it right? And it means an old bum, essentially, yeah. So anyway, it was not a good choice. I'm just going to skip over the old bum part, but and go to my friend Dolly, whose name is not really Dolly, although she goes by Dolly Dennis. She's a very fine author. My friend Dolly, her family, also World War II refugees, suffered similar indignities with her Lithuanian name, Danguolė Benedicta Filipavičius. At least she had a middle name. Benny, but no. When she confronted Anglo culture, Dolly was a grade behind me at Holy Cross, and we became Dolly and Jane. That's how we introduced ourselves to each other by then. And Dolly has spoken about being an invisible versus a visible refugee or immigrant. As European refugees, we did not appear different from the surrounding population until we were identified as the other by our strange-sounding names, our secret identities exposed to the harsh gaze of our Irish Catholic teachers and classmates. Claire O'Neill, a girl in my second grade class, was the principal's and teacher's pet, and she always came first in the monthly report cards. My mother always asked me why I never broke into the top 3 in class rankings. They literally gave you a rank every month on your report card. How could I tell her that only girls named Claire, Judy, or Janet could achieve that honor when I did not understand why that was so? Children can feel discrimination but not really understand it. So that in that chapter, I also go through other people who've had problems with a couple of people I read about, like Mary McCarthy, who hated her name because it was so I guess it didn't have any cachet to it, It was so plain. And I would have killed for Mary McCarthy, right? No. So, but she had, other childhood challenges. But I really loved Arthur C. Brooks' article in the New York Times, which was titled, "Do You Like Your Name?" And in an amusing essay on having an old man's name, he reveals the discomfort he would feel from the confused looks on people's faces who are looking for a 90-year-old man rather than a young boy. Why couldn't his parents have chosen David, the most popular boy's name in 1958 when he was born? He questioned his parents about naming him Arthur, a name that maxed out in popularity back in the 90s, the 1890s. Even his grandfather, whom he was named after, complained that his name made him sound old. Brooks asked his mother one time if they had a second choice for his name, thinking that since David was the most popular name in the decade he was born and was also his father's name, she would answer David. Well, his mother said, "We thought about naming you Chester," she replied. He really decides that Arthur's not so bad after all. And so years ago, through a bit of research, I found out that there is an English equivalent of Jadwiga. It comes from the Germanic name for the saintly Polish queen, who was actually a Hungarian princess, before she became Queen of Poland. It is Hedwig. I will stick with the mispronounced old bum version. Thank you very much. That would have been terrible, so I'm glad we never found that out. But no, I kind of like my name, It still, is a challenge when people can't pronounce it, or they'll just look, like at the doctor's office, they'll look at me and they'll look at the paper, so anyway. But do I have time? Yeah, for a little bit? Okay. So in the epilogue to this memoir, I guess I'll call it, I did go back to Poland, which I hadn't. The first time I went back was in 2007. I went twice. And it was, I guess I was trying to somehow substantiate my my parents' stories and the memories of what it was like. Especially for my mother, because she came from a farm, which is in Tomaszów Lubelski, a small town. It's not in the town, it's kind of outside the town, and it's only about maybe 30 kilometers from the Ukraine border. So things have not been quiet there, let me tell you. But and the farm still exists. My cousin Andrzej farms it, and so the farm was just like she talked about it. It was, you know, like a dream come true. But the rest of Poland, or the some of what I experienced, was not, you know, was not idyllic. Let's put it that way. I mean, it's a country that's still struggling, you know, but has it come to terms with its past? I don't know. Have we come to terms with our past? We're still struggling with it, right? So I'll just read a little bit about a trip that my sister and I flew to Rzeszów, which is south of Tomaszów, and our cousin picked us up. And this was just the sort of first experience of Poland. Since our arrival in Poland a few days earlier, it was immediately evident that the Poles, at least in this part of Poland, drive at terrifying high speeds. I am getting used to this predilection for fast driving since my initial exposure when our cousin Stasiu picked us up at the airport in Rzeszów for a hair-raising 70-kilometer drive to Tomaszów. It was a Sunday morning, and there were many people crossing the local roads on their way to or from church. Cousin Stasiu, from all appearances a polite man in his mid-50s, never let up on the gas and seemed to get a thrill out of making the pedestrians run across the road to dodge his speeding Mercedes station wagon. I shut my eyes as he narrowly missed hitting an old woman in a long skirt, her head covered with a babushka, who, despite her age, trotted across the road. And to make the experience even more bizarre, the car radio blasted American rap music the entire time. Wow, welcome to Poland, I think, and send a fervent prayer heavenward that my life would not end here on the road from Rzeszów to Tomaszów with 50 Cent cursing the mean streets of Brooklyn. So that was just the first exposure. There are more adventures to be had. Anyway, I think good time to stop, and yes, yeah, good, okay. Yeah. Yes, thank you.
The memoir that I've spent the most time with is William Wordsworth's The Prelude, which I have taught many times, and he very famously talks about choosing what he called spots of time. And I wondered, obviously you remember more than you included in the memoir, what your criterion was, what your set of criteria were, that which moments did you choose to explore in your writing?
Wow. And sometimes I'll just remember something else and I say, oh, that should have been in there, you know? And it's like memories they're not constantly there. They kind of come to you, you know, at weird times. What I decided to include, it was, because I had all these pieces. I was in workshops and different, you know, memoir kind of writing classes, and I had all these pieces. Now, how am I going to put this together? And literally, like for 3 months in the summer, I had everything laid out on the dining room table, right, which we don't really use for dining. So, you know, it was all there, and I kept walking around and kind of moving things. And, you know, it's not chronological, but it does capture a period of time, you know, from when I could, like, really remember. I didn't include anything about England, like, actually, except when we left and the voyage across the ocean, because that was very traumatic, you know, because I don't have clear memories of that. I mean, I have, yeah. You know, they're like kind of like glimpses of something that happened, but oh, I did have the part about where my teddy bear got destroyed, but you know, because that was very, you know, very vivid. So if things were vivid enough, I could write about them, you know, and some things just aren't, you know, you remember them, but, you know, it's like, is there a story there, you know? And then, of course, including my parents, you know, they were very clear. My parents were like the kind of people who survived World War II, who didn't hold back. They told me everything, detail. Of course, I asked, too, you know, and it was almost like therapy for them, I think, you know, to have a listener. So thanks, Mom and Dad, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I was struck by your parents being so open, because many times parents who go through the Holocaust or don't speak, and what a gift to you. At the time, how did you feel when they would tell you stories?
You know, it was almost like a movie or something, you know, and I would have them retell it so that I could check up, you know, make sure. And how did I feel? I was interested, you know. I don't think I was traumatized by it. You know, like we just saw that play at Harvard Stage, right, that we went to about Simona's search and how epigenetic trauma, right? And I think I would have been more traumatized if they didn't talk about it. You know, because then you like the dad in that play, right? He didn't talk about it. So, you know, but yet she still felt the trauma, right? And I don't think I did. And it helps to write about it, too. It helps to rehearse it. I mean, I've told these stories before I ever wrote about them, you know, and I think it helps, you know, to, gift to me, yeah. Hi, Linda.
Do you find that you're more of a chronicler, a storyteller, as opposed to someone who is trying emotionally to figure this thing out? I mean, as a child, I think we do emote, but I don't think that we really recognize what we're going through. So are you a storyteller, a chronicler, or did you really dwell on the emotion of the time?
At the time it happened? No, I think I was more traumatized by real life, you know, rather than the stories, you know. I think I'm more of a storyteller because I picked that up from my parents, you know, and I don't think I can say, you know, these stories need to be told, you know, and yeah, they do, but that was not my first kind of reasoning behind it. So, although I think they're important stories, and I love to read other people's, you know, yeah.
Do you really remember that many names from your first grade class?
That was BS. You're right.
Okay, thank you. I'm so glad.
Okay, Linda Dufresne was real. Margaret McCarthy was real. Or Margaret Murphy was real. Okay, they were actually kids I knew. But I had to have, give a sense of alphabetical order. Oh, thanks, Gil. Yeah. He caught me.
I would have no idea.
Yeah, Claire.
I don't remember my name back in first grade.
Claire O'Neill was real. Okay. So I think 3 of the people there were real. And there was an Italian name, and her last name was Cacavelli, and I just couldn't put that in there, you know, because it just, you know what we...
Not Anglo, is it?
Yeah, well, no, it wasn't that. It was the word itself. Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that answer, I'll be honest.
Was there really a Tony? Oh my God, my love. In 4th grade, there was really, I don't forget boys' names. No, and he really did have a beautiful, I didn't make up a lot of stuff. I didn't make up anything except those names, okay? But most of them were true, yeah.
I was so struck by your freedom growing up on the streets when I read it. I mean, because bringing up our kids in Connecticut, that's not life here.
Even though we're next door neighbors and our street is pretty safe, right?
We still didn't let them roam.
No.
So I mean, that was an amazing freedom that you had to grow up, and all the adventures you had that our kids just don't. A real life, going into the funeral home and do all the things that happen.
Read about the funeral home.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was, yeah, we were weird little kids in a way, you know. And I lied, you know. You know, my friend Linda and I lied when we went to get rosary beads. And, you know, so typical childhood, you know. Yeah, so one thing I wanted to say, to encourage you to, if you haven't read the book, is that if you want to know how I became a gangster's girlfriend, okay, I'm serious. This guy would serve time. How I was locked in a church. I yearned to be a ballerina. I loved a pigeon. I killed a cat. Well, not directly, but indirectly, and learned to swear in French and English, then read the book. We weren't allowed to swear in Polish. I didn't even know any swear words in Polish. Yeah.
Do you now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We live near New Britain. Come on, you know. Yeah, that's
One
true.
more question.
Yes. Eva.
No, Renata. Eva is my
I'm
colleague.
sorry. Yeah,
But
it
it's
is
okay, we are
Renata.
from the same department.
Yes.
And I work in the library where we have Connecticut Polish American Archives, and Jane's book is going to be part of the World War II Polish immigrant memoir project. So this story is wonderful.
Thank you.
Probably similar to some other immigrants' experience,
Right.
and born in either displaced person camps, many of them in Italy or Germany or England, and
Yeah.
then immigrate either to the States or to Canada or elsewhere. So, but your story is wonderful. It's, you know, beautifully touching. And you mentioned that you had this project in mind for 20-something years. So when you start thinking about it, like 25 years ago, and till, you know, really wrote, how the story changed? Did you discuss with your sister? You mentioned your sister. I don't know if you have more siblings or family members, just to get even a better flavor of the situation.
Yeah. Well, my sister read it, and she lives in Montreal still. And as a matter of fact, the library, she went to the library and had them, you know, purchase the book. And she had a few qualms, well, different perspective, let me put it on things, right? And so we discussed it, and she said, well, that's not what I remember. I remember, you know, and I'm like, okay, write your own book, you know? I mean, you know, I wasn't going to, of course you'd remember it differently. She's 6.5 years younger than I am, so, yeah. Yeah, and I don't think she heard the stories. Like, you know, I don't remember her. You know, by the time she was, you know, like getting interested in hearing stories, we had television. You know, ruined everything.
Just one more comment about the swearing. It's
Yeah.
still the same, you know, reasoning today. When I immigrated to this country, just swearing in English was just so light.
Yeah.
But in Polish, no.
No, never. Yeah. Yeah, my parents didn't. As a matter of fact, I write in the book about a friend of my father's who, Mr. Kilian, and they were army buddies in Italy. And he had, I guess, he was a little bit older, and he'd been exposed to some Yugoslavians and people from, you know, all over. And he could swear like in different languages. And I wanted to hear that so badly. I just heard that he did, you know, but he never did around you know, the kids, right? Just to find out what is a Yugoslavian or, you know, swear word. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you. Yeah.